This matchup is actually one of the most hyped matchups there is because unlike a lot of other matchups, things like Toji versus Kashimo or Yuki versus Maki, Yuta and Hakari versus Kenjaku actually has a good chance of happening. Because we're at a point in the story where we're basically going towards the end game. Gojo seems like he's going to fight Sukuna, and that leaves Kenjaku as just free game. It seems like Yuta would be the only one to fight Kenjaku. There's been a bit of a narrative build up there, but there's also a good chance that Hakari won't just sit around. There's a good chance that Hakari goes with Yuta to fight Kenjaku. But what would happen if Hakari decided to go with Yuta and fight Kenjaku? Would they be able to pull off a win? Would Kenjaku beat them up? Or does the fight go down to the wire and somebody walks away by the skin of their teeth? We're going to get into all of that in today's video, and as always, thank you for watching. Yuta and Hakari are both third-year students who have made a massive name for themselves within Jujutsu Kaisen. Yuta has become known as the second strongest sorcerer in the modern era behind Gojo, and he has stated multiple times to have an endless amount of curse energy. Even Kenjaku himself, when referencing Yuta, says that he has boundless curse energy. And then we have Hakari, who even though he was expelled from the Jujutsu school, he runs an underground fight club, and Yuta says that Hakari on a roll is even stronger than he is. And then we have Kenjaku, who has recently become known by many fans as the third strongest character in the series behind Gojo and Sukuna. And recently he beat a special grade sorcerer in a fight who was Yuki Tsukumo, even when she had the help of Tengen and Choso. Getting into what would happen in a fight between the three, we have to look at what Yuta, Hakari, and Kenjaku have to offer as sorcerers. Yuta is exceptional in the fact that he has a variety of curse techniques to use in a battle. And not only that, but he can copy curse techniques from the opponent while fighting them. We see this happen when he's fighting Ryu and Uro. He copies the sky manipulation from Uro, then when Ryu tries to shoot a blast at him at the end of the fight, Yuta just bends it towards the sky so it can come back down and hit Ryu. And of course we've seen Yuta copy curse techniques in the past. Like we know that he has curse speech, he had that back in volume 0. We know that after fighting Druve, he gained Drew Shikigami technique, and now he has Uro skybending. But for what the condition is for copying a curse technique from somebody, it is sort of hard to know what it is for sure, because we know that during the fight with Uro, after Uro's arm had already been bitten off, Rika bit the bitten off arm, and that is how Yuta gained the sky manipulation. And at first glance, it might just seem like, okay, well the condition is just biting somebody's limb in order to gain their curse technique. But if you go back to volume 0, it's clear that Yuta got curse speech from Inumaki, and if you look at how hard Rika bit Uro's arm, she bit Uro's arm so hard that blood is gushing out and the arm is mangled. So I highly doubt that Rika bit a limb of Inumaki's in order for him to get curse speech. It seems like there just has to be some sort of curse energy transfer in order for Yuta to get the other person's curse technique. But we'll never know for sure, it just seems that this is the way. And that's for Yuta's abilities, right? But it's not just abilities that makes Yuta so strong. Yuta's greatest asset is that large amount of curse energy that he has at his disposal. And we know that the way Yuta fights, as long as he keeps taking heavy blows from opponents, he will keep using reverse curse technique to heal. We see that Ryu says this about Yuta while he's fighting him and Uro, that every time Yuta was dealt a big blow, Yuta would step back and use reverse curse technique. And we know that one of the problems with using reverse curse technique in a fight is sort of getting the space to do it. But in this fight, he has Hakari by his side, so they'll be sort of using back-to-back attacks, which may give Yuta a chance to step back for a moment and use reverse curse technique to heal. But it is also possible that Yuta can use RCT to heal while just fighting, because even though Ryu and Uro were hitting Yuta with attacks, he was still healing in between fighting the both of them. But even if he does need a moment to use reverse curse technique to heal, there's no better sorcerer to have on your side than Hakari, because his fighting style is just a barrage of attacks that are endless. Now, his main fighting style comes from when he has already hit the jackpot, and as for whether or not he'll have the jackpot going into this fight, there are a couple roads we can go with this. One of the roads is, once Yuta and Hakari realize they're going to be fighting a titan like Kenjaku, maybe Hakari says, well, hold on, let me just pop my domain, hit a jackpot, then we pull up. Just think of it along the lines of what happened when Hakari pulled up on Panda and Kashimo. Hakari was walking up after already hitting a jackpot. Now granted it was against Charles, but even if Charles wasn't there, Hakari just hitting a jackpot and playing a game by himself makes sense on its own. But I will get more into what would happen in a domain clash later into the video. But regardless, if Yuta and Hakari just realized that, going into a fight with Kenjaku, we should do everything we can to prepare, it is also highly likely that Kenjaku just pops a jackpot before going to fight Kenjaku. Because if you know you're about to fight him and you have a jackpot state, why not just pop it before going to fight the guy? And since there is a high probability that they are going to end up fighting him in the series, we might see something like this happen in the future of the story, where Yuta and Hakari just get into their best forms before going to fight. Because think about it, Yuta's duration when he has on his ring and has Rika with him is only 5 minutes. And also Hakari's jackpot state lasts 4 minutes and 11 seconds. So for about 4 minutes, both of them are going to be at their peaks. And a fight against Kenjaku isn't one that you want to go on for more than like 5 minutes, because 5 minutes into a fight like that with 3 special grade level sorcerers on the same battle, especially with 2 of them ganging up on 1, the fight's outcome is probably already determined or ended by 5 minutes. The only reason the Yuki fight took as long as it did is because, well, there was Choso there and Tengen as distractions, and as well, Yuki probably isn't as strong as Yuta or Hakari because of the whole Yuta statement as being second to Gojo, and the Hakari statement about Hakari on a roll being stronger than Yuta. So with a battle of sorcerers all on this level, the outcome would be determined fairly quickly into the matchup. Now I also will be going over what I think would happen if all 3 of them were to domain clash, but for right now, let's just talk about what Hakari's abilities are and how strong he is in his jackpot state, and how viable he would be in assisting Yuta in a fight against Kenjaku. We know that for 4 minutes and 11 seconds, Hakari basically has an infinite amount of curse energy to fight with, and also he has an automatic reverse curse technique running around the clock on his body. So even if he has a limb torn completely off, like what happens when he's fighting Kashimo, the limb will just grow right back. But this ability isn't just broken because of his defensive capabilities. Having automatic reverse curse technique is also broken because of the offensive abilities. So even if you're being hit, you can always keep moving forward. And this is what catches Kashimo so off guard the first time he sees it happen. We see Kashimo blow an entire arm off of Akari's body, and he expects to just go in and finish Hakari off, but Hakari just kicks him anyways and the arm grows back. This surprises Kashimo because who in the world would keep fighting after they see their arm just get blown off? But that's how strong the ability is. You can't just do an attack and wait for Hakari to heal up, thinking that you've gotten him and now you can just sort of take an advantage of him. You need to consistently pile on attacks over and over and over if you're fighting Hakari, because he would just keep regenerating for 4 minutes and 11 seconds. We know the only way to truly kill somebody with this ability is to take his head completely off, because we know that reverse curse technique comes from the head. So if you just smush the head or just cut the head off from the body, then the reverse curse technique will no longer flow throughout and the user will effectively just die. Now, for trying to determine how their curse techniques will match up against each other, we have to look at the curse spirit manipulation and the gravity technique that Kenjaku has. The curse spirits shouldn't pose that much of a problem. We know that Kenjaku has a few special grade curse spirits, but the most recent one we saw just got destroyed by Yuki. So if Yuta and Hakari go to fight him, they won't have to worry about that big elephant curse anymore. So it's all about what other curses Kenjaku has in his disposal that he didn't reveal in his fight with Yuki. But we can sort of get a gauge for the level of curse spirits he did have, because after Yuki breaks his arms, he says, "I can't use a high grade curse spirit like in Shibuya." And he's probably referencing the only time that we saw him use high grade curse spirits in Shibuya, and that is the fish that he used against Yuji. We see that when Yuji runs up on Kenjaku, Kenjaku just puts this fish in the ground and Yuji falls basically. And even though it seems as if Yuji has fallen out of the air, from the side it says that it looks like Yuji just tripped. And Kenjaku basically breaks down that the strength of curse spirit manipulation lies in the great number of moves at his disposal. He says he wields multiple curse spirits of semi-grade 1 and higher, and that he can release them when opponents solve the curse techniques and overcome them. And he also says that he could just pile on the attacks of these semi-grade 1 and higher curses. Now, if you notice here, he just says that he has multiple of these. Now that could be, anywhere from 3 to 300, but if it was a higher number like 20 or above, I think he would have said more than just multiple. And even though they are semi-grade 1 level, they don't seem too strong as they don't even really kill Yuji, and that was a Yuji that was getting piled on attacks by multiple grade 1 cursed spirits. So I think individually, or even if they're being piled on, there's just no way these curses hurt Yuta or Hakari, because Hakari would have the infinite RCT around his body, and Yuta has a massive durability because of the boundless curse energy around his body. So if they didn't even really hurt Yuji that much, then I don't think they're going to really hurt Yuta or Hakari that much. And you have to keep in mind that Yuji just got done with an excruciating fight with Mahito, so he was already on his limit, and he still survived these attacks from Kenjaku. So whether he has multiple special grade curse spirits or not, you know, he only flexes the multiple semi-grade 1 level curse spirits against Yuji, and then we see when he's thinking to himself about what to do against Yuki, he says he can't use a high grade curse spirit like the one in Shibuya, and the one in Shibuya was just grade 1 level. So for these reasons, I don't think Kenjaku has multiple special grade curse spirits, maybe just 1 or 2, or maybe none by this time in the story and he needs to go gather some more. But either way, even if there was 1 or 2 special grade curse spirits, I think Yuta and Hakari would just break right through it in a second. Another ability that Kenjaku has, and is honestly probably his best ability, is the gravity technique, and for 6 seconds, anything within a 2 to 3 meter radius around him gets smushed to the ground. Now, I honestly do think that this won't be that powerful against Yuta and Hakari, simply because they're just too smart for this to be a factor. The only one of the two that needs to be up close in order to do the most damage is Hakari, but Yuta just needs to sit back. And I honestly do think that Hakari is smart enough to find a way to fight around Kenjaku's gravity technique, because Hakari has shown some insane IQ feats in his fight with Kashimo, and not just something that is like smart, you would say. No, like some of these feats that Hakari does are outright just genius. And they're not genius in the sense of like book smarts, you could say, but just under the pressure of being in combat, Hakari is able to deduce things and come up with quick solutions in the midst of a high heated battle. The first time is when Kashimo directs a lightning bolt at Hakari's forehead. And remember, as long as you take out the head of somebody using reverse curse technique, then you just kill the opponent. But as the lightning was hitting Hakari's head, in just that split moment to react, Hakari quickly thought of a way to get out of this predicament, and what he did was push all of the curse energy out of his nose before the lightning attack could smush his brain. There was almost no time to come up with this plan. You have to understand, this is a lightning bolt hitting his forehead, and the amount of time that it took for the lightning bolt to come in contact with his skin to hitting his brain and smushing it, Hakari thought instantly of a way to push the curse energy from the lightning attack out of his nose so he could survive. The next crazy feat is that Hakari actually shifted the barrier coordinates of his domain expansion so that he could drop Kashimo over the sea. Now, this is one where I will say he probably had a good amount of time to think of a plan like this, but it is just so smart that in the midst of battle against a high-paced opponent like Kashimo, you can come up with a plan that, okay, well, this guy is basically an electricity man. If I can drop him into the ocean, then maybe his electricity factor will be worn out. And this does work. But while Hakari is in the sea and Kashimo makes a big explosion, Hakari once again shows an incredible feat of intelligence. We see that Kashimo thinks he won the fight, but Hakari just steps out of the water and punches him anyways, and Kashimo is so confused as to how Hakari is, still alive after taking the explosion. And once again, in that split moment where Kashimo made a big explosion, Hakari thought of a binding vow where he sacrificed his arm in order to win the fight. Now remember, these are impressive not because of the feats themselves, but the intensity surrounding the feats. Hakari was in a fast, high-intensity battle with Kashimo, and he was able to find a way to survive all of these devastating predicaments. And Yuta is also very smart himself when it comes to combat. We know that he was able to fight against Ryu and Uro at the same time, and even at the end of the fight with Ryu, he kept it concealed that he actually had Uro's curse technique, and right when it was the perfect time to use it, right when Ryu shot a granite blast at Yuta, he curved the blast to the sky high, so it came back down and hit Ryu. And this is why Yuta and Hakari are so dangerous. Not because of their power, not just because Yuta has an endless amount of cursed energy, and not just because Hakari on a roll has an infinite amount of cursed energy and he has automatic reverse curse technique. It's also because of these things combined with how smart they are in combat. And the last ability that they would have to worry about is the mini Uzumakis. Now, I will say this, there is no way to tell for sure how strong Kenjaku's mini Uzumakis are, because sadly the only time we see them used is against a Yuki who is extremely beat down. Yuki had been in a long drawn out fight with Kenjaku by this point. She had been hit by Kenjaku's domain. She had used RCT to heal prior, and she had just been going back and forth with physical and curse technique attacks with Kenjaku. And she was just so beaten up by this point that even though the mini Uzumaki goes through her, it wasn't a full power Yuki. She probably was very low on curse energy, so she wasn't able to reinforce her body as well as she is normally. But even then, Yuta has a water tank of durability. He is known for having the highest curse energy amount in the series. So we know that he has an extremely high durability, and at the same time, Hakari just has the jackpot state, so there's just practically nothing any mini Uzumaki would do against them. But now that I've covered why none of Kenjaku's abilities should work against them, let's now talk about the most important part of this video, and that is, what happens if the three of them domain clash? Because remember, once Kenjaku realizes that he can't beat opponents using his conventional abilities, he opens a domain expansion. And there are a couple roads that we'll need to take when looking at this. The first road is, well, maybe Yuta and Hakari are just overwhelming Kenjaku so much that he doesn't even get a domain expansion off, and they just literally beat him into the ground before he can activate his domain expansion. Because remember, Kenjaku only activates his domain when he realizes that he's in a bad and disadvantageous situation. If he realizes this even a second or half a second too late and he lets them get too close, then they probably would just begin jumping him, just like we saw Yuji and Todo jump Hanami, and just begin to just toss him around back and forth until Kenjaku is just a pulp. Because remember, in order to activate a domain expansion, you have to make the hand sign and launch the curse energy forward. We saw that you can actually do this when you're getting overwhelmed. We saw Dagon try to do it, but Naobito was just beating him up so badly that Dagon was not able to cast a domain expansion. The only reason Dagon got a domain off is because Naobito let up, thinking that he had exercised Dagon. And the only reason Mahito was able to get a domain expansion off while getting jumped by Yuji and Nanami is because Mahito just has extra hands in his body, so he just had all of these hands come out and activate a domain expansion for him. But for Kenjaku, he is just in a human Suguru Geto body, so he would make the hand sign like we see him do it, and if he's getting beaten up and jumped, he won't be able to make the hand sign. Now let's look at the second road. What if all three of them activate their domain expansions? Well, we know from Gege that three-way domain expansions are far different than just a two-way domain expansion, because a three-way domain expansion can either be 1v1v1 or 2 versus 1, whereas a domain expansion between just two opponents is one domain fighting against another domain. Remember the domain expansion clash between Yuta, Ryu, and Uro? That was a 1v1v1 domain, so all of these three domains were clashing with each other. And we see Gege say here that the clash of three domains is more complex than for two. As they erected their barriers, the internal and external conditions differed, and there was an unexpected intruder, which caused the barriers to break. So we see that there is something that deals with internal and external conditions differing, which can cause the barriers to break. And keep in mind, this was a 1 versus 1 versus 1 domain expansion. We know that Kenjaku is supposed to be the second most powerful barrier user in the world, but he is going to be going up 2 special grade level domain expansions at the same time. Now that's not just to say that, oh well, 2 special grade level domains, they just have to be Kenjaku's. No, there is actually something different about Hakari's domain. That, remember how I said internal conditions can cause a domain clash to break? There are some weird conditions when it comes to Hakari's domain, where it might truly mess up the domain clash to the point where the domain clash just breaks. Remember that panel where it says that Hakari's domain activation is fast, even faster than Mahito's in Shibuya? We know that there is actually a translation thread on Twitter that Lightning446, who is a reputable Jujutsu Kaisen translator, says that there is actually kanji that Viz and TCB missed, and that scan is actually supposed to say that Hakari's domain expansion is exceptionally strong in tug-of-war battles. And we know that tug-of-war battles in Jujutsu Kaisen are just domain clashes, and it would make sense because Hakari doesn't have a lethal domain sure hit. He just plays a game. So as a trade-off of not having this lethal sure hit, he is exceptionally strong in tug-of-war battles. Now, this next part, Lightning does just admit is headcanon in his mind, but he thinks that since Hakari's domain is strong in tug-of-wars, that Hakari can continue to roll the jackpot even in a domain clash, because his sure hit, which are the rules, is instantaneous and already completed before the other domain user activates their own. So, if this is true, that Hakari's game would just continue to roll because you as an opponent are being hit with the rules of the game even before you activate your own domain expansion, well then there is an argument to be made that maybe Hakari combined with Yuta and Kenjaku's domain all in one clash, Hakari's domain would be trying to bypass the other twos by playing this game, and the clash just might break up. Now, after hearing all of this, if you still think that Kenjaku just wins the clash anyways and just beats them up with gravity sure hits, just tossing them back and forth, then sure, believe that. But I do think that one of the other two outcomes is probably more likely. I do think that Hakari and Yuta, especially with Hakari's domain expansion rules combined with Kenjaku's in that 2 versus 1 domain clash, I think that either Yuta and Hakari win, or Hakari's domain is literally so strange that it just breaks up the domain clash entirely. Now, one thing I haven't brought up until this point, and this is because I don't know if this can be used in a fighting sense, is if Kenjaku can use Tengen or not to mess with the barriers while fighting against Yuta and Hakari. So, maybe in a domain clash, Kenjaku can have Tengen help him, but that's just like a big if. We don't know if that would happen. Maybe if Kenjaku can use Tengen in a way where he can have him help in a fight, then, maybe Kenjaku takes the fight. But because that is a big if, then I'll just leave that up to you guys. But for the things that we do know, their abilities, their domain expansions, and the arguments far in between, I do believe for everything that I've stated so far, that Yuta and Hakari probably would beat Kenjaku. And with that being said, I want to thank you so much for reaching the end of the video. And if you enjoyed, then please leave a like and subscribe to the channel, as I do post every couple days on different topics you guys give me and a few I'll come up with on my own. Thank you so much. See you guys next time.